She had been in the room about 4 minutes before she said it, and in those 4 minutes she had checked a drain, changed a bag, and asked me twice to rate the pain out of 10. Then she wrote something on the chart, and did not look up, and said, "You don't remember me, do you?" I want to describe what happened in my chest at that moment, because I was 2 days off an emergency laparotomy and on a fair amount of medication, and I still felt it clearly. She was giving me an exit. That is what that sentence was. Bonnie Fitzgerald had walked onto that ward on a Tuesday morning, found a name on a board she had not seen in 14 years, and had spent, I found out later, about 90 minutes working out what she was going to say. And what she settled on was a question with a door in it, phrased so that a man could say, "Sorry, no," and both of them could carry on. She was being kind. She has been being kind about this since 2009. "Bonnie," I said. She stopped writing. "You were in my English class in year 11 and my chemistry class in year 12. You lived on Prine Street until your mum moved. You had a dog called Ivan that was frightened of the bin lorry." My voice was not doing very well. "We walked home together for 2 years. The chart went down on the end of the bed." "Okay," she said. "Bonnie, I need you to rate the pain out of 10, she said. "And then I need to go and do the bay, and then I'll come back. I'm Colton Feld, 32, and I'm a welder. Structural mostly. Sites, fabrication, a bit of ornamental work when somebody wants a gate. I've done it since I was 19 and I am good at it, and it is the only thing I have ever been unambiguously good at. What put me in that hospital was an appendix that had been grumbling for 4 days while I told everybody it was something I had eaten. By the time I went in on the Sunday night, it had perforated, and what should have been a keyhole job and a night in became an open procedure, a washout, 6 days on a surgical ward, and a scar you can see from across a room. I want to be exact about the 4 days because they matter for what Bonnie said to me later. Thursday, a dull ache I put down to a bad pasty from the van on site. Friday, worse, and I did a full day welding a handrail 60 feet up, which the surgeon later described as an interesting choice. Saturday, I could not stand up straight, and I told my mother it was a pulled muscle, and she believed me because I am extremely convincing about my own body, and have been since I was about 19. Sunday afternoon, it stopped hurting, which I took as excellent news and which is in fact the single most dangerous sign available, because it means the thing has burst and the pressure has gone. Sunday at 9 at night, my mother came round with a shepherd's pie, took one look at me on a sofa, and drove me in herself without asking. I have thought a lot about the fact that a woman who is not a nurse and had no information at all was the person who overrode me, and that I would not be here if she had believed me, and that I had spent 4 days making sure she would. Bonnie Fitzgerald was on that ward. Days, mostly. Long shifts. I had not seen her since we were 18. Here is what happened between us at school, and I am going to tell it straight because there is no version of it that improves with arrangement. We were friends, properly. 2 years of it. It started because we walked the same way. Prine Street runs out toward the industrial end, and both of our houses were down there, and the school gate to my front door is about 25 minutes, and hers was 2 streets further. 2 years of 25 minutes. 5 days a week, term time. That is something like 350 walks. We talked about everything on that road. Her mother, who was ill on and off the whole time. My father, who was not around and about, whom I had never said a single word to anybody. Whether I was going to do anything after school. Whether she was. She lent me books, which I read badly and returned late. I fixed her bike twice. I want to give 3 specific things from that road, because we talked about everything, is what people say when they cannot remember anything. The first is October of year 11. Her mother had gone into hospital on the Tuesday, and Bonnie came to school on the Wednesday and did the whole day. And on the way home, she got to the corner by the chapel and stopped walking and stood there for about 4 minutes and did not cry. And I stood next to her and did not say anything because I was 16 and had nothing. And then she said, "Right," and we carried on. The second is a Thursday in the spring after. I told her about my father. All of it. The leaving, the 2 visits since, The thing he said in 2005 that I have never repeated to another human being, including the woman I am married to. She listened to the whole thing. 25 minutes, one interruption to ask a question, and at the end of it she said, "That's the worst thing anybody's ever told me," and did not say anything comforting, and it was exactly right. The third is a Friday in the last term, when she asked me what I was going to do after, and I said welding, and she said, "Good," and I said, "You're the only person who's said good," and she said, "That's because everybody else is asking what you should do. I asked what you're going to do." I was 17. Nobody had ever made that distinction to me in my life. And at school I did not know her. That is the accurate way to say it, and I have tried about 9 other ways over the years, and they are all worse. In a corridor with my mates, I did not know Bonnie Fitzgerald. Not cruelly. I never said a word against her. I want to be clear that I did not do that and would not have done that. What I did was nothing. She would come past and I would carry on with whatever I was saying. She would sit 2 rows in front in chemistry and I would not turn round. Once, in the 6th form common room, a lad I knew made a remark about her, not a savage one, the ordinary background kind, and I laughed. Not loudly. I laughed the amount you laugh to not be the one who didn't. And then at 3:10, I would walk down Prine Street with her for 25 minutes and tell her things about my father. I have never told my wife's family. 2 years of that. 350 walks and not one hello in a corridor. I want to be honest about what I thought I was doing, because he was ashamed of her is close, but is not exactly it. It was not that I thought she was beneath me. It is worse and more ordinary than that. I had a place in that school, not a high one, a workable one, in a group of about 9 lads, and I had spent 5 years getting it, and I did not have much else. And Bonnie Fitzgerald was not in any group at all. She was one of about 4 people in that year who existed outside the whole arrangement, and everybody could see it, and being seen with her would have cost me something. So I ran 2 versions, the road version and the corridor version. And the road version was the real one, and I knew that at the time. And I ran the other one anyway for 2 years because it was cheaper. We left school in the June. She went to her aunt's in the August. I did not say goodbye, which I have thought about a great deal. And that is what a woman was doing on a surgical ward on a Tuesday when she gave a man an exit. She came back at about 2 after the bay. "Right," she said. "That was unprofessional of me and I'd like to reset it." "Bonnie! You are a patient on my ward 2 days post-op, and I asked you a personal question, and I've had 90 minutes to think about it, and I shouldn't have." She had the chart again. "So, I'm going to look after you the way I'd look after anybody, and we're not going to do this while you're in that bed." That's fair. It is fair. It's also entirely for my benefit, so don't be gracious about it. She almost smiled and did not quite. Pain out of 10. 6. You said 6 yesterday when you were gray. Try again. 8. 8, she said, and wrote it down. And that is how I learned that I had been lying to her about pain for 2 days, and she had known both times. I was on that ward 6 days, and she was on shift for 5 of them. I want to describe what she is like at work, because it is the thing I did not know. And it reorganized how I thought about a person I had known for 2 years. Bonnie Fitzgerald is frightening. Not to patients, to everybody else. I watched her in a bay for 6 days, and the thing I could not get over is the register she works in. Completely calm, completely certain, and about 4 steps ahead of everybody in the room, including, on 2 occasions, a doctor. I want to record what those 6 days were actually like, because a man lying in a bed has nothing to do but watch. She runs 6 beds. On a bad day, 8. She is on her feet for 12.5 hours, and she takes her breaks about half the time, which I only know because the healthcare assistant said so in front of her and got a look for it. In 6 days, I watched her do the following, none of which she would describe as anything. She got a man in bed 70-odd, post-op, confused, to take a tablet he had refused 4 times for 2 other people by sitting down, which nobody else had done, and asking him what he thought it was for. It turned out he thought it was for something else entirely and had been frightened of it since Monday. She spent 11 minutes on the phone with somebody's daughter in another county explaining the same thing 3 times in 3 different ways until the woman understood it, and did not once let her voice change. And on the Wednesday she came in at 7 in the morning, having clearly not slept, said good morning to the entire bay by name, and did a 12-hour shift, and I found out 4 months later that her mother had been readmitted overnight. Bed 3 was a man in his 80s, post-op, who went off on the Thursday afternoon. I did not know that was what was happening. Nobody in that bay knew except her, and she knew about 9 minutes before anybody else, and she got him to theater. Afterward, she came back and did the obs round, and her hands were completely steady, and she asked me about the pain. "Are you all right?" I said. She stopped. "You've just had a man nearly die in bed 3, and you're asking me about a 6 out of 10. That's the job." "I know it's the job. I'm asking if you're all right." And Bonnie Fitzgerald stood at the end of a bed and looked at me for about 3 seconds and said, "No, oh, not particularly," and then went and did bed 5. That is the entire relationship. That has always been the entire relationship. On a road, for 2 years, she was the only person I said true things to, and it turns out that runs both directions, and I had never once tested it. She talked to me on the Friday. Not much. She had 11 minutes at the end of a shift, and she used them. "I want to say one thing, and then I'm going home," she said. "You said we walked home together for 2 years. That's true, and I want you to know I've thought about those walks a lot, and they were the best part of that entire 2 years for me, and I've never told anybody that." "Bonnie, let me finish. I've got a bus." She had her bag on. "And the other thing that's true is that you didn't know me in that building. And I understood it at the time. I want you to hear that. I did understand it. I was not confused about what was happening. I just want to say out loud that I knew, because I've spent 14 years suspecting that you thought I hadn't noticed. I could not say anything at all. That's it. That's all I wanted." She got the bag on the other shoulder. "You're discharged Sunday. Marge is on Saturday. She's better than me. Don't tell her I said that." "Bonnie." She stopped in the doorway. 4 days, I said. "I had it 4 days, and I told everybody it was a pasty. My mother drove me in on the Sunday, and I argued with her in the car park." "I know, it's in your notes." She did not turn round fully. "Presented late, perforation, that's the second line. I've been trying to work out why I did that." "You're a man of 32 in a trade," she said. "I've had 9 of you this year." "That's not the reason." Bonnie Fitzgerald turned round properly then. "No," she said. "It isn't. Go on." "I didn't want to be the person who needed something." My voice went somewhere odd. 4 days, and I've been on lying here for 5 of them, working out that this is the same thing as the corridor, just pointed at me instead of you. She stood in that doorway for about 4 seconds. "That's a very good sentence, and I'm going to miss my bus," she said. "We'll do it properly when you're not on morphine." I was discharged on the Sunday at 11 in the morning. She was not on. That was deliberate. I found out about a month later that she had swapped a shift to not be there, because she had decided that a man collecting his things and a woman in a uniform was the wrong shape for whatever was going to happen next. Marge, who is 58 and has been on that ward since 1994, gave me the discharge letter and the sheet about the scar, and then said, without any preamble whatsoever, "She swapped for today, you know." "Did she?" Marge did not look up. "I've worked with that girl 11 years, and I've never once seen her swap a shift she wasn't rostered off for." She handed me a leaflet about wound care. "Anyway, don't lift anything over 4 kilos for 6 weeks. I sat in the car park for about 20 minutes and then drove home and did nothing for 4 days because I had been cut open 8 days earlier and because I did not know what to do. On the Thursday I drove to Prine Street, not to a house, to the road. I parked at the school end at about 4 in the afternoon, and I walked the 25 minutes to where my house used to be on my own, at the speed of a man with a fresh abdominal scar, which is very slow. It took 40 minutes, and I want to describe what that walk did, because it is the reason I was able to say what I said afterward. I had spent 14 years with a version of that story where I was 17 and stupid, and it was a long time ago. And I walked that road on a Thursday afternoon and worked out something I had never let myself have, which is that 350 times she got to the end of that road and went home. And then the next morning, she walked into a building where I did not know her. 350 times. She did it 350 times and came back the next day. I rang her that night. "I've walked Pine Street," I said. There was a silence. "All of it?" "All of it. Took 40 minutes. I nearly had to sit down outside the chapel." "Colton, you've had a laparotomy." "I'm aware." I had to stop for a second. "Bonnie, I need to say something and I don't want to say it on a phone. Can I come somewhere? Anywhere. You pick it." She picked a cafe on the ring road that neither of us has any association with, which I understood immediately and appreciated. I want to write down what I said because I had 2 days to get it right, and I did get it right, which is not something I can say about most of my life. "You asked me on the Tuesday if I remembered you," I said, "and I want to answer the actual question because I don't think the actual question was about memory." She had both hands round a cup. "Go on." "I think you were asking whether I'd be honest about it. And you'd built the sentence so that I could get out because you've been giving people that door your whole life." I made myself keep going. "So, no door. I remember all of it. I remember the dog and the bike and the day your mum went in the second time and you didn't tell me until we were at the corner. I remember every single one of those walks. Colton, and I remember not knowing you in the corridor every day for 2 years." My voice went and I let. "And what I've worked out this week, walking that road, is that the thing I did wasn't 17-year-old stupidity. I knew. At the time. Every afternoon at 3:10 I got the real version back, and every morning at 9 I put it away again. And a person cannot do that by accident. I chose it 350 times because it was cheaper for me and expensive for you." Bonnie Fitzgerald put her cup down. "I'm sorry," I said. "That's the whole thing. I'm not going to explain it, because there isn't an explanation that survives being said out loud, and I've tried about 9 of them this week." She did not say anything for a long time. "Do you know what I've wanted for 14 years?" she said eventually. "Not an apology. I want you to know that because you've just given me a very good one, and it isn't the thing." "What's the thing?" I wanted somebody to say it happened. Her eyes had gone. "That's it. That's all of it. Everyone in that school saw it, and nobody has ever said one word about it, including me, and I have spent 14 years wondering whether I made it bigger in my head than it was." "You didn't make it bigger." "I know that now," she said. "I've known for about 4 minutes. She turned her cup round. "Can I tell you what I did with it? Because I've never said this to anybody, and I'd like to see whether it survives being out loud." "Please." "I decided it was accurate." She said it flatly. "Not that you were a coward, that you were correct, that there was something about me that made a person who liked me, and you did like me, I was never confused about that, decide I wasn't worth the cost in a corridor. And I have carried that as information about myself since I was 17. I could not say anything at all. "I want to be clear that I have had a whole life," she said. "I'm not telling you I've been sitting in this town crying since 2009. I trained, I worked, I was married for 2 years in my 20s, and it ended reasonably. I have a career I'm good at, and about 6 people I'd call at 3 in the morning. But I have never once been the person who says the first thing." She looked up. "Not with a man. Not with a friend. Not at work. Not once. And I have always known exactly where that comes from, and I have never had a single piece of evidence about it, because nobody would ever talk about it. And now? And now a man has driven to a cafe on a ring road and said it happened." Her voice went. So that's the evidence, 14 years and 1 Thursday. We sat in that cafe for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and when we came out into the car park it was dark, and neither of us had a reason to be standing there, and I said something completely idiotic about the weather, and Bonnie Fitzgerald said, "Colton, I am 32 years old," and took hold of the front of my coat. I want to record that I was very careful of the scar, and she was more careful, being a professional, and that at one point she said, "Mind, no, other side," in the exact voice she uses on a ward, which neither of us has ever been able to think about without laughing since. The 3 months after that were the easiest of my life, and I did not appreciate them at the time. We went slowly, mostly because I was healing and could not do very much, and it turned out that was the best possible start. 6 weeks of a man who cannot lift anything means 6 weeks of sitting in rooms talking, which is the exact thing we were good at in 2007 and had not done since. She came round on Tuesdays and Fridays. I could not drive for 4 weeks. She brought food and did not make a thing of it, and once, in about week 3, she changed the dressing on that scar at my kitchen table because the practice nurse had done it badly, and she did it in complete silence, with the same face she uses on the ward, and then washed her hands and said, "Right, what are we watching?" I have thought about that 11 minutes, more than most of my life. We told people in about the march. Small town. You do not announce things. You just turn up somewhere together and let it happen. Rhett Bowen has been my friend since we were 9. I is not a bad man. I need to say that at the start, because of what he did, and because the easy version of this story makes him a villain. And he is not one. He is something more ordinary and more useful to understand. I was one of the 9 lads. He was specifically the one at the center of it, and the one whose opinion I was managing on those corridors, and he does not know that, and never has. The pub on a Friday. 6 of us. And Rhett, who had not seen Bonnie Fitzgerald since 2009, worked out who she was about 4 minutes in and said, "Bonnie, God, yeah, from school. You were the quiet one." And Bonnie said, "I was, yeah." And Rhett said, "Weird that. You'd never know now." And everybody laughed, including Bonnie, and the conversation moved on. I said nothing. I want to be exact about what happened in my head in those 9 seconds, because it is the whole failure, and it took a fortnight to be able to look at it. I heard it. I heard it land. I saw her face do the thing it does, which is nothing, which is the point, because Bonnie Fitzgerald's face has been trained by 14 years of nursing and about 30 years of that town to do absolutely nothing. And I had a sentence available. It was there. It was she wasn't quiet. We all just decided not to talk to her. And I did not say it because Rhett had not meant anything by it, and because saying it would have made the table go strange, and because we were 4 pints in on a Friday, which is, word for word, the same reasoning I used at 17. I had it in a corridor, and I had it again at 32 in a pub with the same man. She was quiet on the way home. Then she said, in the car, not accusingly, "You went somewhere." "When?" "When Rhett said the thing." She was looking out of the windscreen. "You went somewhere for about a second and a half, and then you came back and you laughed a bit late." "Bonnie!" "I'm not asking you to have said anything." She turned. "I want to be clear about that because I've had 2 hours to get this right. I am not a woman who needs a man to defend her in a pub. And if you'd made a speech at that table, I'd have wanted to die." "Then what?" "I want to know that you saw it." Her voice was very level. "That's it. That's the entire ask. Because at 17, the worst part was never the laughing. It was that afterward you'd walk me home and be completely normal, and I could never work out whether you'd noticed." I did not have anything to say. "So," she said, "did you see it?" "Yes." "Thank you," she said, and put the radio on. And we drove 11 miles without saying anything else. And that was the worst car journey of my adult life. And she was not being cruel for 1 second of it. It took me 11 days to work out what to do. And I want to be honest that I got it wrong first. My first plan was Rhett, sit him down, explain it, get him to apologize. I had the conversation drafted by about day 4. And on day 6 I understood that this was a man solving his own problem in public and calling it loyalty, and that Bonnie had explicitly told me she did not want a speech at a table, and that if I went and organized an apology out of Rhett Bowen, I would be doing the thing she had spent 30 years having done to her, which is other people arranging the version of her that gets said out loud. I want to describe how I got there, because it did not arrive as wisdom. It arrived because on day 5 I told her the plan. That was the only intelligent thing I did that fortnight. I said, "I'm going to talk to Rhett," and she said, "About what?" And I said, "About what he said." and she went quiet for about 4 seconds. "Can I ask you something, and will you not be hurt by it?" "Go on." "What are you going to get out of that?" I did not have an answer. "Because if it's that Rhett understands," she said, "then that's a good thing, and I'm all for it. And if it's that I get an apology at a table with 6 people watching, then I would like to be asked first, and my answer is going to be no." "It's the first one. Colton." She was not unkind about it. "It's the second one. You want it fixed in the room where it happened. And I understand exactly why, because you've been carrying a corridor since 2009, and this is the first chance you've had to be the man who says something. But the room isn't mine. It's yours." That took 6 days to fully land, and it is the most useful thing anybody has said to me. So I did not do that. What I did on day 11 was go to Rhett and talk about myself. That is the whole difference, and it is the only truly useful thing I have ever worked out on my own. "I need to tell you something about school," I said, "and it's about me, not about you, and I'd like you to just let me say it." And I told him. The 2 versions. The road and the corridor. 350 walks and not one hello. Rhett Bowen listened to the whole thing and then sat there for a long moment. "I didn't know you walked home with her." "Nobody knew. That was the entire arrangement." "Colt," he rubbed his face. "Mate, I've been thinking about the pub since about the Saturday. My missus said something on the way home, and I've not been able to shake it." "What did she say?" "She said you called that woman the quiet one to her face." He looked ill. "And I've been going, well, she was. And then this week I've been trying to remember one single time I spoke to her in 5 years, and I can't. Not one. And I've realized that's not her being quiet, is it? That's just what we called it." I did not say anything, because he was getting there faster on his own than I could have got him. "Was I—" He stopped. "Was I the reason, with you and her, in school?" I had about 2 seconds to decide whether to lie to a man I have known since we were 9. "You weren't the reason," I said. "You were the audience. There's a difference, and it's not much of one, and the reason was me." Rhett Bowen sat in a car park for a bit. "That's a hell of a thing to find out at 32, he said. "It's a worse thing to have done." "Yeah." He looked out the windscreen. "Does she know Is she all right?" "She's fine. She's had 14 years to be fine about it." "That's not the same as being all right." "No," I said. "It isn't. That is a far better outcome than the one I had drafted, and I had nothing to do with it. It came from a woman in a car on a Friday night and about 6 days of Rhett Bowen not being able to sleep, and my entire contribution was talking about myself for 11 minutes. I never made a speech about it. He did one thing about a month later, which was better. There was a group of us at somebody's thing in the summer, and a name came up from school, a lad neither of us has seen in a decade, and somebody said the sort of thing people say, and Rhett said, "We were all pretty rubbish to him, weren't we?" in a completely ordinary voice, and the conversation went somewhere else. Bonnie was standing about 4 feet away. She did not look at me, and I did not look at her. She mentioned it in the car 11 miles later in exactly the same tone she had used the first time. Rhett said a thing. I heard. "Good," she said, and put the radio on. And that was the whole conversation, and it is one of the best I have ever had. Here is what Bonnie did, and it is the part of this story that is hers. The town's version of Bonnie Fitzgerald is that she never left. That is what everybody thinks. She was the quiet girl on Pine Street, and now she is the nurse at the county hospital, and she has been here the whole time. And it is said kindly and constantly, and it is completely wrong. She left at 18. She did her training in the city, then 4 years on a cardiothoracic unit, then 2 years as a senior on a trauma ward in a hospital that takes half a county. 7 years. She came back at 26 because her mother's second illness was the one that did not stop, and she has been here since. And in 6 years she has never corrected a single person. Why not? I asked her when I found out, which was in the May, from her mother's neighbor in a queue by accident. Because correcting it means saying, actually, I did something. She was doing something at the sink and not looking at me. And I have never in my life been able to get that sentence out. Bonnie, you ran a trauma bay. I know what I did. She turned round. I have never once said it out loud in this town, and it is the single most cowardly thing about me. She fixed it in the June, at her mother's 70th, in a room with about 40 people in it. I want to describe the 2 weeks before it, because she did not simply stand up on the night. She wrote it, 3 drafts, at my kitchen table, and let me read the second one, and then did not use a single note I gave her, which was correct. She also nearly did not do it, twice. The first was about 9 days before, when she came in from a shift and said, "I've decided it's showing off and I'm not doing it." And I said, "Okay," and did not argue, because I had learned by then that arguing with Bonnie Fitzgerald about her own decisions is how you lose the actual conversation. 4 days later, she said, "Ask me why I'm not doing it. Why aren't you doing it? Because if I say it out loud, then everybody who spent 6 years thinking I never left has to adjust, and some of them will be embarrassed, and I'll have made 40 people uncomfortable in order to feel better about myself." Is that true? She stood in that kitchen for a long moment. "No," she said. "That's just the version where I don't have to do it." She got up to say something about her mother, which was expected, and she said it, and it was good. And then she said, "One other thing while I've got you, and it'll take 11 seconds. The room waited. Most of you think I've been here the whole time. I haven't. I left at 18 and I did 7 years, 4 of them on a cardiac unit and 2 running nights on a trauma ward. And I came home in 2019 because Mum needed me, and I would do it again tomorrow." She had her glass in one hand and it was not steady. "I've let people think I stayed because it was easier than sounding like I was showing off. And I'm 32, and I'm not doing that anymore." She sat down. The applause was about 4 times louder than the bit about her mother, which she has never let anybody mention. And her mother, who is 70, and who has known exactly what her daughter did for 7 years and has never once been permitted to say so at a table, cried for about 4 minutes and then said to the room, "I've been waiting 11 years for her to say that." I have thought about that sentence more than almost anything in this story, because it means that Bonnie Fitzgerald's own mother had been holding it too. 6 years of a woman not correcting a version about her own daughter because her daughter had asked her not to. That is what those arrangements cost. Not one person. Everybody in reach. I proposed on Prine Street. Obviously on Prine Street. There was no other option, and she saw it coming from about the second we parked at the school end, which she has told me repeatedly and which does not bother me at all. We walked it. 25 minutes. Same road, worse pavements. The chapel is flats now. I want to describe that walk, because it was the 4th or 5th time we had done it as adults, and it was the only one where either of us said anything about it. She stopped outside the flats that used to be the chapel. "This is where I stood in October of year 11. I know. You've never said that you remember that. I remember all of it, Bonnie. I've told you that." "You've told me you remember." She was looking at a building. "You've never told me which bits." So I told her. Which bits? The 4 minutes at the chapel. The Thursday I told her about my father. The Friday with the welding and the distinction nobody else had made. She listened to all of it standing on a pavement in front of some flats. "You've had those the whole time," she said. 14 years. So have I. She started walking again. "I've had a version of every single one of those, and I have never once been able to check them against anybody, because there was nobody to check them with. You're the only other person who was there." At the corner where she used to go 2 streets further, I stopped. "For 2 years I got to the end of this and went that way," I said. "And you went that way, and the next morning I didn't know you. Colton." I'd like to do the rest of it out loud. I had the ring in my coat and my hands were not working properly. All of it, in daylight, in front of anybody who's looking. Marry me. Bonnie Fitzgerald stood on a corner she had walked to 350 times on her own and said yes, and then said, "Took you 14 years and an appendix," which she has said at approximately every family gathering since. We married the following April. Rhett was there. He gave a reading, badly, and he came and found Bonnie at the reception and said something to her that took about a minute and that she has never told me, and I have not asked because it was not mine. Marge came. She has since retired, and she and Bonnie speak most weeks. Her mother gave a speech that was 4 sentences long and that ended with, "I have waited a very long time for somebody in this town to be proud of her out loud, and I would like it noted that in the end she did it herself and he just stood there looking pleased," which is the most accurate summary of this entire story that anybody has produced. I asked her once, about a year in, whether she had known, on that ward, on the Tuesday, that I remembered. "No," she said. "I genuinely thought you wouldn't. That's why I asked it like that." "You'd have taken it? If I'd said no?" "I'd have taken it and I'd have looked after you for 6 days and been completely lovely about it." She said it without any drama at all. "And then I'd have gone home at the end of the week and had a very bad Sunday, and that would have been the end of it." That's a horrible answer. You asked. There is one more thing and then I will stop. About 2 years ago, I did a gate for somebody out past the school. Ornamental, which I do about twice a year and which is the only work I ever properly enjoy. And I put a thing in it. Not a signature. I would not do that to a client's gate. Just a detail in the scrollwork. In the bottom left. That is a shape I have been drawing on the back of things since I was 17, and which is, if you know what you are looking at, the bend in Prine Street where it goes past the chapel. Bonnie saw it about 4 months later, driving past and pulled over and rang me from the verge. "There's a road in that gate. There's a road in that gate. Colton Feld." She was doing something with her voice. "How many of these are there?" I did not answer that, and she has not asked again, and I am not going to write the number down. We still walk it, not often, maybe 4 times a year, and always the whole thing, school gate to the corner. She does not go the 2 streets further anymore. That is the only thing about the walk that has changed, and it is the entire point of it. And we have never once said that out loud to each other. Have you ever been friends with somebody in private and a stranger to them in public? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.